Good evening and welcome to the school board meeting for July 9th. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Move for an adoption of the agenda. Any changes or corrections, Dr. Castro, before we adopt the agenda?
Yes, sir. Sorry, I just had the wrong agenda in front of me. Staff would like to request that we move item 15B1 to take place before action.
Okay. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda with that amendment.
You said 15B1.
15B1, yes.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Thank you. Vote as follows. Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes.
Trustee Lavier?
Yes.
And Trustee Dannenberg?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 3-0.
Okay. Do we have any public comments for closed session?
We do not.
Okay. Closed session. We'll be in closed session to discuss public employee discipline, dismissal, and release pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B. Conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, Government Code Section 54956.9 D2, number of cases 1, and public employee performance evaluation pursuant to Government Code 5457B, regards to the superintendent, and then contract with labor negotiations pursuant to Government Code 54957.6. I'll entertain a motion to go to closed session.
So moved?
Second.
Thank you. Vote as follows. Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes.
Trustee Lavier?
Yes.
And Trustee Dannenberg?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 3-0.
Okay. Welcome to the Board of Education meeting for July 9th. Would you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Ms. Dawn.
Thank you. President Dr. Jerry Dannenberg,
Here.
Vice President Calvin Peterson, and Trustee James Forsythe are both absent this evening. Trustee Alicia Levere,
Here.
Trustee Sabrina Rodriguez,
Here.
and Superintendent Dr. Antonio Castro.
Here.
Thank you.
Item 10, report of actions taken in closed session. This evening, we took no actions in closed session. So we'll move on to the good news, Superintendent's report. Dr. Castro.
Thank you, Dr. Dannenberg. I'm going to turn our good news over to Gina Wolowitz for introduction.
Good evening. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Ms. Ortiz, who has 22 years of experience in education. She started her career as an outreach coordinator and counselor in Santa Paula Unified School District in 2002. She also served as the AVID coordinator for 4 years prior, where she led positive changes and achieved measurable outcomes, including an AVID certification as the recognized school site. She then became an assistant principal at Wainimi High School for 7 years, and most recently she served as assistant principal at Camarillo High School since 2019, where she has led collaboratively with diverse stakeholders and drive school-wide initiatives. Ms. Ortiz has experience and expertise in special education, intervention, positive behavior interventions and supports. She is bilingual in Spanish and an excellent communicator with students, parents, staff, and community members. She's committed to uplifting students who are often marginalized. Her approach to problems is open-minded, collaborative, and forward-thinking, working with teams to find solutions. We believe that Ms. Ortiz is going to make an excellent addition to an already talented and dedicated team at De Anza Middle School. Welcome.
Did you want to say anything, Dr. Castro? Okay. Okay.
Good evening, President Dr. Dannenberg, trustees Dr. Castro, and executive cabinet. This is my family, Andy, Alex, and my mom, Senior Clara Ortiz. I was named after my mom. I want to thank you for the opportunity for being part of Ventura Unified School District. I'm deeply honored and excited to serve as the principal of De Anza Academy of Technology and the Arts. I'm committed to working collaboratively with the district, teachers, staff, students, parents, and community to build a positive and inclusive learning environment where every student can thrive academically. I live in Ventura. My boys graduated from Ventura Unified School District, and I have seen firsthand the positive impact that Data Middle School has had on my younger son, Andy, who promoted from Data. And I would like to pay it forward by providing students the same experience. I look forward to upholding the district and Data's mission and vision. Thank you again for your trust, confidence in my leadership, and I look forward to serving the community of Ventura. Thank you.
Congratulations. Comments from the board?
Oh, I just want to say welcome. It's so lovely that you brought your family, and we're just really excited to have you. Data's a really special school, and I know they'll be thrilled to have you there, so thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, congratulations, and we're really lucky to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're happy to have you. We're looking forward to your leadership at the school and looking for great things to come of it. And want to thank your family now, because you might not see her much in the future. The life of a principal is different. So with that, thank you. And Dr. Castro.
Thank you. And I'll just add, in the interview process, your passion and commitment in particular for the families and students that we serve along the avenue came through. Thank you for bringing that to our district. I know that you carry that with you no matter where you go, but thank you for allowing us to benefit from your passion. And then also just to note that the people who were on your side and recommending you, the words that they had to say about who you are as a leader and as a person really shone through in that process. And again, it was just more evidence that we are fortunate to have you and benefit from your leadership in our district. Welcome.
Thank you, I'm honored. Thank you.
Congratulations. Correspondence. Do we have any correspondence this evening, Dr. Castro?
We do not.
Any from any of the board members? No. Okay. Moving on to public comments. Do we have any public comments?
We do not.
We do not. Okay. So we're going to, one of the things that we did earlier was to amend our agenda to bring item 15B1 before the action agenda. This is a conference item, and it's time that we do that. Dr. Castro.
All right. Dr. Mirza, are you ready to take this on?
Yes, good evening, board. We have invited back NG, who was approved for the solar contract. As we're working through the different school sites, Ventura High School is unique in its own challenges. And so we have them here to kind of talk about what they've found and what are some options available at Ventura High School for solar.
Hey everybody, can you hear me okay back there? We're good? All right, well thank you everybody for having us. All board members, we appreciate being able to come up here and talk about Ventura High School and all the work that we've been doing for the site for the solar project. So just to start off, I want to take everybody back to 2023 when we were...
I'm sorry, just real quickly, if you wouldn't mind, if you or anyone else who comes up, if you could just give introductions as you come to the mic.
My apologies, yes. My name's Kevin Watson. I'm the project manager from NG Services. On the left is Shira Zingman-Daniels, the project director, my manager, and then Amelia Cottrell from our business development team. So,
Thank you so much.
yeah, thank you. All right, so to start off, I wanted to talk about last year in 2023 when we were developing the overall solar portfolio and specifically on Ventura High School. When we were designing this site, we encountered a few site constraints that went into the overall design and where we ended up with the design that you see here. So just a couple of things that we took into consideration for the original design was the first one was on the community and the overall impact that that was going to have on the surrounding area. We know that this site is historical, is one of the oldest sites, and there is a very beautiful aesthetic here. We didn't want to disrupt that. We also didn't want to disrupt any lines of sight or cause any issues with any of the neighboring houses around the area. So that was the first thing that we took into consideration. The second thing we took into consideration is if anybody's been to this site, tried to do a project here, you can see that it's very space constrained. There's very little available space there to develop and install our solar canopies. So that's one of the reasons why we ended up with the original design in the student parking lot. The third consideration was we did briefly discuss rooftop arrays. There were three things that kind of prevented us from doing that. The first one was that there just simply wasn't enough available space on the existing rooftops. So, you know, there's certain requirements that we have with setbacks and everything, so we had to keep that in mind. The second thing was that these buildings are very old, and putting solar arrays on rooftops, that would require structural upgrades, and we really wanted to avoid another cost burden for the district if we were to do roof arrays. And then the third one was putting a solar array project through DSA permitting is quite honestly a nightmare. Most of the projects do experience significant setbacks in permitting, and given that we wanted to meet the net metering deadline for 2026, we wanted to make sure that we advise the district that there could be significant permitting delays for doing rooftop arrays. So those are all the reasons why we ended up with this design. And if you go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is just an overall timeline going back from July of 2023. So, you know, we basically, just to kind of summarize this, I don't want to go into every single detail right now, but going into contract with the district, NG agreed that we would look at all existing available data from the California Geological Survey, from the Ventura County, and from the district itself to see if there was any evidence of fault traces, because, and I think the slides are actually a little bit out of order from what we had sent. I don't know if you can go to the next slide. Okay, perfect. So on this slide, you can see the blue outlined area. That's an earthquake fault zone. So we knew that going into contract with the district that this site fell within that fault zone. And you can see the yellow outlined area is where our proposed solar arrays were going to be. So due to the proposed design falling within the earthquake fault zone, we knew that there was possibly evidence of a fault trace. So as I mentioned, we agreed with the district that we would review the available data from different permitting agencies, from the county, and try to determine if there was a fault trace. Can you go to the next slide? Okay. So we did review all of the reports, and we found in 2 reports that were done at Ventura High School where they did the fault trench investigations, they found evidence of fault traces. So that confirmed our theory that that we would have to do a fault trench investigation ourselves. And it's just this markup. You can see where the original fault trench studies were done, and then where the new trench studies would have to be, partly on the softball field, partly in the parking lot, going into Poley Street. And so knowing that this was going to be what we had to do, we advised the district that, you know, we thought it wasn't the right idea to move forward with the trench investigation. 1, because it was going to be very costly, and 2, there was still a likely chance that the design was going to be rejected during permitting. That even if we did the fault trench investigation, there wasn't going to be a guarantee that this would pass through permitting. So, you know, wanting to just advise the district on what the right path forward was, we advised them to not do the trench investigation.
Sorry, just to interrupt you for a second. Can you give a ballpark on very expensive for the trenching?
Right. I believe the costs were around about $300,000 for the trench investigation. Yeah, these trench investigations, I wish we had pictures, but if you get a chance, they're very deep, very wide. They just require a ton of work, a ton of labor. It's very, very involved. And honestly, the one that we were going to have to do here, it was going to extend into the main street there, so it was going to require some pretty extensive work overall for not only us, but also on the district side to coordinate with the site. So we wanted to be very mindful of that. All right. Cool. You're ready. I was just going to ask you to turn to the next slide. Thank you. All right. So knowing that we had to redesign the system to get it out of the fault zone, we knew we had to stay out of the fault zone and maintain the total KW system size without reducing it by more than 20%. This is the design we came up with. So you can see that instead of the canopies being in the parking lot, we moved one of the canopies to the main courtyard area, just south of the yellow shaded fault zone. And then we moved the other canopy and turned that into a ground mount array in this parking lot north of the stadium. So just those ground mounted systems are lower to the ground, have a lower profile. One thing to note on this is that even though the ground mount sits within the earthquake fault zone, DSA, our permitting agency, they they classify ground-mounted systems differently than canopies, the shaded canopies, because there's nobody parking underneath them, there's nobody hanging out under the canopies. It's a different occupancy zone, so thus it's not required, it's not subject to requirement of the fault trench investigation. So, and then if you could go to the next slide, please. So this was the second design that we came up with. Very similar to the one that we just saw. However, you can see that the ground mount is about half the size. We took the other half of the ground mounted system and we moved it to a canopy just outside of the fault zone next to the softball fields. There's a very small parking lot there. So that was just with the idea of trying to take up trying to reduce the number of parking spaces in that north parking lot as possible. So if you go to the next slide, please. And these are just some examples of the solar canopies and ground mounts. So the top left one, that you can see a bunch of smaller rows on the left side. Those are our classic ground mount design. So as I mentioned, the lower profile, nobody's parking underneath them or camping under them. And then the shade structures are just the other design. So we just wanted to show some examples of that. I know there's probably a ton of those and we drive past them every day, but just wanted to give a few examples of those. All right, so I'm going to stop there for any questions.
Any questions by members of the board?
Yeah, so full disclosure, I'm not a big fan of these changes. I just, losing the parking spaces up behind the stadium, I think is a real loss. And so I guess some of the questions I had were if you kind of look to the west, or if you can go back to a picture of this stadium, thank you. Yeah, you can see that to the left of that concrete pad, there's a hillside there that is unused. It's where it's just kind of dirt to the left of the stadium.
Yeah.
Did we look at that area as a potential ground array location because it's currently unused? And then the second question I had is about the parking lot that's on option 2. Could that be increased so that you actually have a larger array there in a way to kind of either remove some of the parking infringement and or take the large array out of the senior quad, because that's the other place that you're proposing putting them.
Right, so to answer your first question, so that hillside between the western parking lot near the stadium and the baseball field, that was an area I think we had briefly discussed. I believe it was that the slope was a bit too steep to install ground-mounted arrays there. That was the first one, and the other issue was that it's basically right at the home run spot for baseballs being hit there. So that was another concern. Building in the parking lot there, that's a little bit less subjected to impacts from baseballs, but we really wanted to reduce the possibility of strikes from baseballs on the solar panels. So that was to answer your first question. The second question, to increase the size of the canopy near the softball field, we couldn't go any bigger than that because we do have certain setbacks from existing buildings. And we couldn't, so to kind of increase it either to the west or to the east, we had to maintain certain setbacks, and I believe that was as big of a canopy that we could build there. And those setbacks are based on building code through California building code and DSA.
Okay, because if you're looking at that, the parking lot canopy array on the design 2, there's like a kind of storage facility that's to the right of that. That's currently it abuts neighbors, right? And so there's a pretty big space there. It has some trees on it, but there are trees, so presumably we can take them out if we needed to. I'm just looking for options.
Yeah. No.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, I recognize this is important. I'm 100% in support of the solar, but I really would love to see it not have this impact on our stadium usage.
Yeah.
And if I'm honest, I don't love the idea of it being in the senior lawn.
totally
So-
understand.
I
Yeah.
kind of like, though, that it might provide some shade on this, in the senior lawn area, though. That's a positive, just kind of playing devil's advocate, but I could see with it being there.
Yeah. So one thing to keep in mind is what I mentioned, trying to keep the system size to not reduce it by more than 20%. So if we reduce it by more than 20%, which, you know, you take any one of those out, it kicks this site off net metering 2.0 with SCE and puts it on net metering 3.0, which is just less financially beneficial for the district. So that's why we're trying to maintain as much of the original system size while also keeping the space constraints in mind. And we completely understand with, you know, wanting to keep students in mind and all that.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, sorry, and just one other question. So on option 2, you have them kind of stacked. Do you have the option of extending them in like a long lateral line? Because then they would be up against the fence line and not impacting neighbors' views, but at the same time kind of not taking up parking spaces.
So if you go to design 1, just in the previous slide, so something a little more similar to that.
Yeah, except out of the parking lot and on the dirt.
Yeah, that's also similar, too steep of a slope to install the ground mounts on that slope. And there is also not enough available space on the slope as well, so. You wanna?
Yeah, apologies for stepping in. Shira Zingman-Daniels, Project Director. Thanks again for your time here. I did just want to comment with respect to a lot of the other space in that parking lot by the softball field. You can see that we are just barely outside of that yellow shaded zone. So we do, for any canopies, have to stay outside of that yellow shaded area per building code. With respect to the ground mount, I also just wanted to point out that because those are lower profile, they sit about 1.5 feet off of the ground to maybe 2 feet on the low end. They're easily accessible by the public. It can pose a safety risk. So we do install permanent fencing around it, whereas a canopy array is a minimum of 10 feet clearance. So students can occupy the space underneath, exactly like you said. It can be a nice shaded spot within a courtyard. We frequently have those at schools, and actually many other schools within this district are proposed to have courtyard and playground canopy arrays for that exact reason.
Did you possibly look at a canopy over the staff parking lot along Main Street there?
That's just to the south of the campus. Yes, we did look at that area as well. There's a number of telephone poles and utility poles along that street that would cast shade on street lighting. Excuse me. A lot of street lighting poles that would cast shade onto the solar panels and really reduce the overall production from the modules.
There's also an easement off of the
Right.
Light poles, so we actually can't build that close to them.
I'll just take this opportunity to share that. First of all, thank you for all of these comments and questions. As you can imagine, we've put NG through similar ringers on the staff side because we're doing the best that we can to implement some really great things that will benefit the students and the district. However, in the implementation phase, these are the things that we've learned that are constraints. So please continue to ask any additional questions. You've done a great job of addressing the reasoning behind them. Are there, just from a staff perspective, based on the questions you've received from the board, are there any other questions or any other sites that you had thought in terms of alternatives that we're not talking about, other solutions that you had also considered that just weren't feasible? If not, it's fine, but just wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about any other considerations that you'd given before we came forward with these 2 proposals.
Do you mean at this specific site, or?
Yeah, just at this site, yeah.
I think that's where that question was, right in front of the school where.
With the autonomy.
Yeah, but I believe what NG was saying, it has to be a certain amount of feet away from the sidewalk and a certain amount of feet away from the building in order for us to be able to put up the shade.
Right.
And so I think that was our conversation initially from the onset, is like, why don't we try here? That was the first go around. And so we're bringing this forward because we're running out of options.
Yeah.
We already know it's not a favorable option at that.
One thing to say that Ryan just reminded me of, when we were doing this redesign and coming up with these two alternate designs, we did briefly discuss putting it out on that very southwest part of the property, out in the very front, and putting a solar shade canopy, I think, would just really disrupt the overall aesthetic of the front of the school. We would have to take down all those palm trees as well. So that was one of the reasons why we said no on that spot, or the district had said no.
But are you saying
What?
it's an option? It's an option?
Yeah.
But are you saying that's a viable option? I mean, mine, yes, we have the palm tree, we have to worry about and other aesthetics, but it can be possible. So that would save potentially more parking up there. So that would be like a solar design proposed. Number 3 would be some shade up there in the front, reducing the footprint that we leave back there. Oh, sorry. Sorry, and leaving the parking lot canopy array by the baseball field as well.
Also, I'm just kind of wondering, to the right top of the stadium, kind of below the bathroom that's there, that's actually not very steep. I'm just wondering if that would be again, it has shrubbery right now on it, but that's ours, we could take it out.
Talk about the green space.
Yeah. Actually, on both sides of the stadium seating, you could clear that out. And
Yeah, I know at the west side of the stadium, there's a ramp to get up to the north parking lot. I don't know much about that east side spot. Ryan, you want to
Yeah,
step
so
in?
on the left side, as part of the redesign of the bleachers and the stadium overall surfacing, we have to create a new ADA ramp in that hillside to the left. To the right, it is quite steep. They're more competent in answering how steep is too steep. Yeah, so we have looked at those options, as well as the hillside butting up against the neighbors as well. The property line actually runs kind of in the middle of that hillside, which is why that was, nixed from the beginning of going on that hillside. And with, quite some transparency, I'm the one who said no to the solar arrays in front of the school. I didn't think it'd go well presenting it. And it's just, it is an option, but in the beginning, they did present it, and I said, I don't see that going over too well. So, but on the hillside of the stadiums, that's kind of where we're at right now.
The only thing that I would add is we do have to be cautious with ground-mounted arrays next to stadiums, because stadiums tend to be tall to be able to see into the stadium, and that provides a lot of shading than on the solar arrays, which again are low profile.
It doesn't there because it's on the hillside, but I
Yes.
can see where it would normally. I don't know, from my perspective, I would kind of like to see some other options and maybe get some community feedback. I don't know, have we heard from site staff on this? Like, do they have any thoughts? We got a lot of comments about where the volleyball court went, right? So just wondering if people have opinions about this.
I'm sure they will. And this is actually why we're bringing this at this stage of the development, because one, we were absolutely aware of how the volleyball court process went, so we wanted to elicit some feedback. Already, I'll just kind of call attention to it. We will continue to go through options, just as Dr. Mirza was starting to do a moment ago. Also, there will be some trade-offs. Like, for example, one of the things that came up was the potential for tree removal. Then whenever we move into tree removal, there's a whole set of other criteria that comes into that. So we just wanted to get your temperature in terms of how far we should push the design elements. Like, there are merits from an aesthetic perspective of being able to see Ventura High School from a variety of reasons why you don't want to be the first thing that you see are solar panels. If the board seemed to tolerate that, pictures of Ventura High School now will have solar panels at the front of it, and there's a tolerance for that, then we can absolutely bring that back. But again, this is why we're bringing this to you, and as a reminder, this is a conference item, so for that exact reason.
I guess, so if we're just throwing out other options, I mean, I would also love to know if there's any roof on the campus that could potentially take solar without a crazy amount of re-engineering. I mean, it is an old campus, but not every building on the campus is old. The math building is relatively new, right? So like, are there buildings there that with a little bit of effort could take solar panels, because that might be something to look at as an option? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
We can look at it.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we can look into further.
Nice thing. Yeah. So a question for the board, with the historical knowledge you guys have that I don't, the student parking lot above the baseball fields, is that typically, during games, like pretty crowded? I would imagine so. Would
Yes.
losing spots in that area be less impactful than above the stadium?
No, both parking lots are fully
Yeah.
utilized. And I would agree with Sabrina, we don't really want to do anything to encroach upon that parking. We need to keep
I-
exploring until we find other alternatives.
We agree.
Because the thing is that upper parking lot, sorry, I know I'm
Yeah.
supposed to, the upper parking lot is mostly where like our disabled
Yes.
family members park, right? So because if you're in a wheelchair, you can just wheel up to the top of the stadium. So impacting that really does have a hard to replace
Yes.
impact for the community, right? So it's not just that it's parking spots, it's particularly who parks there.
And since they're nodding heads, I didn't want to make sure that we acknowledge that. Those are conversations that we've had too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This is no one's choice, by the way.
Okay.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
for comments and feedback. We're not in a rush to finish the item, but are there any other thoughts, solutions, criteria that you want us to consider? Because really, from this point forward, there is no easy solution. As you said, like even if we were to look at roofing situations, you're now spending more money to do so. So,
Well,
Actually, I have one other
yeah.
question.
Yeah, I was just, sorry, Sabrina, I was gonna ask, Angie, is there a certain time frame on this? How, yeah, when do you, how
So,
quickly can we come back with some additional options, like checking out the roofs, potentially putting something in the front?
I would turn it over to you because you've done a roof project, so I think you know more of the details.
Well, I mean, at this point, if we're talking preliminarily, we can have layouts, next week for people ready to look at. We can have a slightly more dialed in, at least rough order of magnitude idea within a few weeks. That's not a problem. With respect to full engineering on a roof, if we were to move forward, that takes months and months. But I think we're not at the point of making that decision at this point. I understand we're just talking feasibility of various solutions. So that's absolutely something that we can prioritize to get more ideas before you as soon as possible. Even, I mean, I don't know if it's fair to say this, but even potentially at the next board meeting. I think with respect to the other side of this timeline, though, we do have to keep in mind, as has been mentioned, we have this 2026 deadline for the net energy metering tariff, and unfortunately, electrical equipment has extremely long lead times. We're seeing lead times for switchgear and panel boards of a year to 2 years, and that's without delays, which tend to hit pretty much every time. So we do just want to keep that in mind, because we can't finalize engineering or go into permitting until we, have a design. And then the last thing I would note is, with respect to permitting, if we do go with a rooftop, we should expect that to take at least 9 months through DSA from the time that we submit it to the time of DSA approval, and that's with a fairly expedited approval process.
Sorry, as compared to the time frame for not using roofs, what's the difference?
About 2 months.
So the other question I had is, you said if we go below, like 30% triggers or the net metering 3.0, right? So if we reduced it to keep within that 72% of what we originally planned, right? Could we bump up other school sites a little to offset what we lost potentially at Ventura High School? Like, is it the whole system that, or no?
Sadly, no.
Okay.
While that would be amazing, it's not allowed by the utilities. So SCE treats each campus, each interconnection separately.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the action agenda. Action item A, superintendent's contract, an ad hoc committee. The board will create an advisory ad hoc committee regarding the superintendent's contract, and the advisory ad hoc committee will be dissolved upon the conclusion of the contract negotiations. So we need a volunteer or two. I would be happy to volunteer for this if
I'll volunteer.
And are we all okay with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have our ad hoc committee. Thank you very much. Oh, we need a motion.
I
Okay.
move that Dr. Dannenberg and Ms. Levere form an ad hoc committee.
I'll second.
Thank you. Vote as follows. Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes.
Trustee Levere?
Yes.
And Trustee Dannenberg?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 3-0.
Action item B, educational services, consideration of new course. Dr. Bayless?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Dannenberg and board. Pleased to bring, this is the first of 2 new courses that we are proposing, both of which will be primarily led at Buona High School, but they're available to all of our high schools. This first one, advanced filmmaking. There are several models in UC A to G, advanced and honors, and we can, basically we're asking for a approval for an advanced filmmaking course that could be co-enrolled depending upon numbers with another course. We're primarily moving this away from a CTE model as CTE no longer can use the previous filmmaking class in a pathway, so we're redesigning this pathway. We're really pleased to be able to bring this for you. We think it's a good fit for a lot of students' desires and interests.
Questions by the board?
I just wanted to thank you. I asked the question prior to the meeting about this being an honors option for some of our students, and I know that that's a potential second step to this, so thank you. Also, I was really pleasant because I went down the A to G rabbit hole for a little while. Was really pleased to see that there are districts that are using film and cultural studies to meet the E requirement, not just the F requirement for A to G, which seemed like it really kind of opened up some options for kids language-wise. So I don't know if we ever think about those things, but
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because we do. There are lots of very creative things that we can do with film studies and English, and that's something that I know that Deidre and I have talked about, and we have an eye on. This particular course is more on the technical side of filmmaking and storytelling, but it's certainly an area of interest for students, and there are lots, you're absolutely right, there are lots of really good creative courses that are blends of these that can fulfill other graduation requirements and A to G requirements.
Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
so moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Vote as follows. Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes.
Trustee Levere?
Yes.
And Trustee Dannenberg?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 3-0.
Okay, second course, consideration new course, theater production. Dr. Bayless?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Dannenberg. Many of you, of course, recall all of our spring musicals and our fall plays. Right now, we have a system where students audition, but the majority of students involved are working in the background, they're volunteering, and there's nothing that appears on their transcript. And this course is designed to support and honor all those students who are working and volunteering. It doesn't in any way preclude students who can't take this course from still being involved in the play, still auditioning, and still, but it is really designed to try to honor the work that the students are doing who have traditionally in the past been volunteering. And it's another option as a 7-period day. It's going to be offered during 7th period. So I think this is a great fix for a lot of students to help honor what they have been doing for a long time just as volunteers. So we're really pleased to bring this to the board. Again, planning on having it be used primarily first year at one high school, but certainly available to all students at all of our high schools who offer theater productions.
Any questions by members of the board?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. So would, let's say somebody wanted to volunteer, let's say take the class for just one semester, even though it's a year-long course, they would be able to, like, since it's a 7th period, they could just opt in at one semester?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think that there's anything that prohibits us from offering it on a semester basis. I think that we don't have a lot of semesterized courses anymore other than college and career and health and econ and government. So, but there are on occasion where a student needs a semester. So I think this is one of those courses where that could be a fit, but it's not designed as standalone semesters, but it certainly has that option.
Okay. I'll move approval.
So moved.
Thank you. Vote as follows. Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes.
Trustee Levier?
Yes.
And Trustee Dannenberg?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 3-0.
Action item C, Human Resources, approval of provisional interim permits, PIPs, and waivers. Ms. Wolowitz.
Thank you. So this is a process that we utilize when we are hiring for our hard-to-fill positions, and so we bring this forward to you for consideration this evening for one of our recently employed.
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Thank you. Vote as follows. Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes.
Trustee Levier?
Yes.
And Trustee Dannenberg?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 3-0.
Substitute teacher incentive rate. Ms. Wolowitz.
I was just laughing at my mouth that wasn't working very well on the last item. So this item is exactly what we brought to you last summer. This strategy to fill our substitute positions was highly successful this past year, and so we have some other safety precautions on our high absent rate days. However, this really has significantly reduced our need to provide that additional layer that has a greater impact. And so this is just a really great tool that we've been able to utilize. And our substitutes typically ask if it's going to be renewed or not, because they do tend to take our jobs over other districts because of this incentive. So we bring it forward to you this evening for your consideration.
How does it compare to other districts? Like, are other districts doing similar incentives?
I don't have that information. However, I would say that based on the number of teachers, the subs that we have that comment on it, I would imagine that it isn't a consistent practice that districts are continuing to use.
Ms. Wolowitz, I agree with everything you said in terms of an incentive, but we also have some districts that just have a rate, like a standard rate, that is set at a higher rate than other surrounding districts, correct? Yeah.
Correct. And so this allows us to compete with that.
Oh, so other districts have a standard rate that's closer to our incentivized rates.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Thank you. Vote as follows. Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes.
Trustee Levier?
Yes.
And Trustee Dannenberg?
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0.
Action item D, Human Resources Classified, ratification of contract for first counsel, general counsel. Getting ahead of myself there. It's recommended the Board of Education ratify the attached employment contract for the general counsel beginning July 1, 2024. And before we do anything else, I have something I need to read. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54953, Subdivision C3, the Board provides the oral summary of the salary and/or fringe benefits recommended for the following local agency executive. The Board has reached agreement with Anthony Ramos for the position of General Counsel. The material terms of the contract are as follows. The term of the new employment contract between the district and the General Counsel is from July 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2027. The salary to be paid to the executive is $219,627. Additional elements of compensation include 22 days of annual vacation, district-paid health and welfare benefits as granted to other classified management employees, sick leave granted to on the same basis as is granted to other classified management employees of the district, and any other benefits contained in the contract. So are there any questions by members of the board? If none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the contract.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you. Vote as follows. Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes.
Trustee Levere?
Yes.
And Trustee Dannenberg?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries 3-0.
Welcome back.
Yes. Okay. Action item E, business services, request for approval of contracts exceeding $25,000. Dr. Castro, did you want to address this?
Thank you, Dr. Dannenberg. I don't have any additional statements other than that this is provided to the public, the board has access, and staff is available to answer any questions you might have.
So I had submitted a question/comment. I was really surprised by the architectural services contract, but I appreciate the explanation that it's fairly involved. I did also have a question, so it's okay for you to come up.
You were preparing for that nicely. I love the way you walked forward.
It is a lot of money.
And I know Tyson, so it's fine. But
Yeah.
I appreciate the value, and he has very specialized local knowledge that is
Yes.
really, I think, a huge asset to us. But it's a lot of money. But the question that I'm glad you're up here for, maybe it's for Hassan, the consultant that we're hiring for the state facilities fund, are we going to track, if we're paying this person $75,000, are we going to track what they're helping us to bring in from that program?
Absolutely, yeah. This firm, I think, has helped the district in the past recoup state matching funds, but yes, we do track how much we pay them on an annual basis and what benefit that we're getting from this company.
And do you have a kind of ballpark in your head of what you hope they'll help us generate?
The state matching funds, there's multi-million dollars available.
The initial review when my predecessor was still here was $19 million. Since that initial review, I provided them the approved implementation plan. They're reviewing that now, so it should increase actually, given some new incentives for solar as well, state incentives. And to go back a little bit, the $75,000 is a not to exceed number, so it's done like on a T&M basis, if you will. So every phone call I have, they'll bill me an hourly rate. So that's their contract not to exceed. So they're doing that evaluation now. I told them to kind of stop until after today. But yeah, so like I said, the initial review was 19 million. So it should increase. Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
A second?
Thank you. Vote as follows. Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes.
Trustee Levere?
Yes.
And Trustee Dannenberg?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 3-0.
Item 2, consideration of resolution 24-14, approval of Measure E, Citizens Bond Oversight Committee members and alternatives. Dr. Castro, do you or Dr. Mirza want to address this?
Sure, I'll start and Dr. Mirza jump in. So we received some individuals who have volunteered for these positions. The ad hoc committee, I met with them to review these applications to ensure that they were aligned with the minimum requirements. And so tonight we have the opportunity to appoint members to this oversight committee and to approve the resolution with it. Anything that I missed, Dr. Mirza?
I think I just wanted to add that initially when this committee was formed, in order to stagger the members' timeline of when they're serving, so they volunteered to, there's a couple individuals that are up for their term that actually volunteered to go for the one-year term, and that was done intentionally to stagger the start and end times for the members, so we're never vacant. But going forward, this would be a 2-year term.
Okay, any questions by the board? If there aren't, I will entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Well, it isn't clear who we're approving.
That's correct. There would need to be discussion in terms of what, if the ad hoc committee had recommendations for who would be approved for that committee. But we also need an approval, correct me if I'm wrong, of the resolution itself, right?
Yeah, I was surprised that the ad hoc's recommendation wasn't included in this, so that's why I wasn't sure.
Oh, understood. Okay.
So I believe the ad hoc recommended reappointing Kim Prilhart and then appointing Cheryl Heitman, Jorge de Leon, and Shannon Fredericks. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
So is that enough now we can take a motion? Okay.
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
And I'll second.
okay.
Thank you. Vote as follows. Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes.
Trustee Levier?
Yes.
And Trustee Dannenberg?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 3-0.
Okay, on to the conference agenda. Conference item A, Human Resources, report regarding Williams Uniform Complaint Procedure Quarterly Report. Ms. Wolowitz.
I'm pleased to report that there were no complaints received during this quarter.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions? No? Moving on. Consent calendar. We want to move them to approve the entire consent calendar, unless anybody has anything they'd like to pull off for individual consideration. No?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Vote as follows. Trustee Rodriguez?
Yes.
Trustee Levier?
Yes.
And Trustee Dannenberg?
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0.
This might be a record.
Might be right. Okay. Item 17, ad hoc committee reports. Do we have any ad hoc committee reports, Dr. Castro?
We actually just talked about the exact ad hoc committee reports. I don't think we have any others. Thank you.
Okay. Coming events.
Okay, fantastic. It's up on the screen. We are, believe it or not, even though we just finished the school year, we're in preparation for the next. So right around the corner, we have our Celebrate event on August 13th. First day of school follows right after. Labor Day holiday, September 2nd. Looking forward to our CDAC committee coming back together August 30th, and our PAC will meet on September 6th. Thank you.
Okay. Future board agenda items. Obviously, we have the board self-evaluation on July 11th, board retreat on August 29th, a study session for the FICMAT report to be determined, and the historical preservation of Washington School to be determined. Are there anything else the board would like to add to future agenda items?
Yeah, I had two things. First, with regard to the board retreat, I wanted to see if it made sense for us maybe to move that to January in light of the election cycle, because I do think we're going to have it in August, and then potentially we could have 2 new board members, right? We'll certainly have 1 new board member. I mean, I would like to be reelected, but I'm just saying, like, it's an option, right? So it seems like it might make sense for us to move that conversation to have it with our whole new board. And so I just wanted to put that out there as an option.
Obviously, it's the board's discretion. One of the things I would think about is we've had a couple of disruptions over the last couple of years, like because of COVID. So we actually really haven't had a chance, even with the current board, to get into that. And it may happen again. We may have people absent. I don't think there's anything wrong with holding this meeting and then also putting another one on the event, because whatever in my opinion, these processes are so beneficial. Whatever conversation we engage in, there's going to be a residual piece that we could always come back to in greater detail. But of course, that comes down to our CSBA availability and then the board's availability. But we can look into it just to see. We have some time before this comes up anyway, and then we also will have some time during the self-evaluation potentially to look at people's general availability too. So. Would that work?
I just think those kind of shared learning opportunities are really important, right? And it's a really valuable time for us. But it just seems like, especially if the goal is to go deep on some like particular area of focus, then I thought, well, it might make sense to do that with the new board. The second thing I had was we did get an email this week, and it was a reminder about the MOU regarding our playground spaces with the city and like a shared use conversation. So I wanted to see if that was something that we could have a future board item around, or if there's or if there's a better way to have that conversation, whatever that looks like.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can put that down as a future board item if there's consensus of the board. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so joint use agreements. And we can, I don't know exactly what update we'll have, but we can certainly have a conversation. We'll prepare for it. Okay. Thank you.
One of the things that we can do is look at the fee structure that, if we have one with the city, for when they use our facilities and that, and to see if that's up to date and consistent with law and consistent with.
And I think there are some model joint use
Right.
agreements from around the region that we could also look at.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Okay, we'll move on to board superintendent comments. Any comments by members of the board?
I just wanted to thank our HR staff and our communications for being at the 4th of July parade. I really tried to go, but I couldn't. But it's like, you know, it's a long holiday weekend, and I really appreciate the fact that people were there doing the outreach for the school district. I know it makes a big difference, and the community appreciates seeing people there. So, so please tell your folks thank you for being there.
Okay, Dr. Castro, do you have anything?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any need to go to closed session?
We do not.
Then that's the end of our agenda. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you. Vote as follows: Trustee Rodriguez,
Yes.
Trustee Levier,
Yes.
and Trustee Dannenberg.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 3-0.
I don't want to say it was because Calvin wasn't here, but I mean. And thank you to TDC Studios. Appreciate you guys.